Uh, this is something that I've kind of put together, and it's on the website for our elders training. So this is something that I've done as I've been doing elders training around the division as well. So the main premise behind this whole presentation, something really very obvious, I think, we'd all agree with, that change is natural in living things that grow. So we expect to see change. Anything that's alive, that's growing, then it's got to be changing all the time.
Alexandra, please can you unmute your mic? Alexandra and Ivan, thank you.
Okay. So that's the basic premise, that change is a natural part of our lives and who we are. Now, the whole thing about change and spiritual growth is very biblical. Here are just some of the texts, and you're all very familiar with. For example, in Luke 2, where it says that Jesus grew, actually. He didn't come finished as a finished product. He grew, both in wisdom and physically, and in favor with God and man. So he grew spiritually as well. So that was a development for Jesus. Paul tells us, that we should seek to grow, to become more like Christ. In Hebrews, we're told, we should be leaving behind those elementary teachings about Christ and move on. So there should be growth in who we are. Peter talks about it as well. Like babies have to grow, craving milk, and so that you will grow up in your salvation, as he says. And he also says to make every effort. And then he adds a kind of growth methodology, method, if you like. So you add to your faith goodness and knowledge, etc. So it's a growth process. And of course, growing in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So growth is very natural to us. It's part of our natural spiritual process, as well as physical, as well as mental process. Now, if we were together, I would have asked you to outline what stages you would think of spiritual growth, but we're going to skip that. And just to let you know some of the resources that I looked at in preparing this. My first exposure to this idea was from Fowler's book, Stages of Faith. And those of you who've read that, you know that he talks about the development of the human and how that goes along various stages of development, and that our faith develops in stages as well. So he connects it to that. Hagberg and Grulich, they also talk about developing a faith journey. They outline 6 stages in their book. Brian McLaren, in Naked Spirituality, he has like 12 stages or 12 words that he uses to talk about how the stages develop. And also John Pauline, this is just a snapshot from his website. John Pauline, he also, if you go there, you can find a presentation on stages of faith development. So I've used some of these resources, lean pretty heavily on what John Pauline has to say as well. And I put it together for myself like this. So this is how I would put the, what I would say, 6 stages of faith development together. And we will go through these 6 stages. Now you count them and you'll see 7, but I'll explain what that D and S is all about. So they are the 6 stages of faith development that I just want to present to you today. Now, before I get into that, just a few general observations for us to take with us before we go into the different stages. First of all, there are no shortcuts. So you don't jump from stage 1 to stage 6. You've basically got to go through the whole cycle as it is. You know, you don't jump from being a toddler to being a teenager. There is a natural progression, and that's the way it is with this. No stage is better than another. So, you know, there's no, we shouldn't be looking down on you. If you start discovering, oh, I'm a stage 4, you don't start looking down on stage 2 or anything like that. There isn't one stage that's better than another. You know, if you have children in various ages, your toddler isn't better than your teenager. Well, some may question that. But anyway, those who've had teenagers, I think you understand what I'm saying. But generally, you know, none is better than another. It is possible to live in more than one stage at a time. You know, kind of transition, you find yourself in more than one stage. That's okay too. So we're dealing with human beings here. And to try and categorize very definitely is quite, you know, it's impossible for humans. So don't get too specific on all of this. And what we do is, as we develop, we take the best from the previous stage with us as we grow into the next stage. That's the idea. That's the thought behind this. The challenge is that we can get stuck in one stage, and we will talk about that as we go through. Now, there's discussion as to, is there just one cycle, or are there several cycles that you go through? You can make up your own mind as to what you think. Some people think that, well, you keep cycling through these stages as you develop, which could very well be possible. Others say, well, it just seems like there's just the one cycle that we go through. And that could also be possible. You make up your mind and decide what you think as you see these. And we need to let this be a natural progression. You know, you don't grow by trying hard. You just allow God to help you grow. You don't have to make an effort to go from teenage into young adulthood. It happens. And so it's the same thing here as well. One of the key things in all of this is mentoring. And I think you'll see this as I go through the stages. It's really important. And as you mature, the number of mentors that you can have actually decreases. There aren't many, you'll find that there aren't many people that are ahead of you as you mature through these stages. But at the same time, as you mature, the opportunities for you to mentor someone else will increase. So it's important to recognize that. And I think, you know, when you read the Bible, I think it really does speak to all of the stages, and those parts of the Bible that kind of connect with you most easily are most likely the ones for your stage. And then there are other parts that you just don't understand them. Okay, that may be for another stage of your faith development. So they're the few observations I just wanted to put in there before we now go into the various stages. So stage 1, the first stage of spiritual development is the romance stage. This is where we're thinking we believe. This is that time of the first love, if you like. It's where a person develops this kind of childlike trust in God. And there's very much this openness to who God is, and very innocent approach to God. And really, their faith isn't built on a lot of rationality, which is fine. It's okay. It's much more feelings oriented, if you like. And there's this great sense of awe and thankfulness as you discover and understand who Jesus is and accept him as your savior. And that it's a really important stage, I believe. If you were to think of biblical examples, I wonder who you would give of someone in this romance stage, stage one. Well, here are a few that I would suggest. Perhaps the woman at the well when she discovered when Jesus says, "I'm the Messiah." And what does she do? She leaves her jug and runs back into town and just starts saying, "Come and meet somebody who's told me everything I've ever done." She was just overwhelmed with who he was. Didn't know much else. I mean, she couldn't give you a Bible study on a whole heap of stuff, but you know, she was just in awe of this Savior. Perhaps Zacchaeus, when Jesus came to his house and spoke to him, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to sell half of all that I have, and I'm going to repay 6-7 times everything." I mean, if you're to do that logically, he'd have no money left. But you know, that's okay, because you're overwhelmed by this sense of awe of who Jesus is. Mary, who washed Jesus' feet, possibly another example. And maybe this is what Jesus was saying to Nicodemus. Nicodemus was trying to approach God very intellectually, and Jesus said to him, "You know what? You need to just be born again. You need to start with that sense of awe at who God is, and have that, as Madeline was showing it, this love for God." And when you look at some of Jesus' teachings, when he talks about the hidden treasure or the pearl of great price, that you'd sell everything you have to get this treasure, I think he's talking to a kind of stage one type of person. Now, the challenge is that you can get stuck in this stage. So, you can start being overwhelmed by feelings of unworthiness. Those who are converted later in life can think, "Oh dear, think about how I was before, and how can God really accept me as I am?" And because they don't have a very deep knowledge of the Bible, that can also be a challenge. And yes, without having a greater depth of understanding of the Bible and how things work, you can become a prisoner to superstitions. And what tends to happen then is a person tends to isolate themselves and think, nobody understands what I'm going through, nobody else is like me, and have this kind of feeling of, yeah, I'm the only one, that martyrdom type of feeling. And so, mentoring, how do you mentor someone here? Well, helping them feel accepted, really important. Acceptance is such an important part of this. Helping them to discover community support, discover their place within the church community. And yes, they do need to be connected to mentors. I think one of the great failings that we have within our church denomination is that we don't have proper mentoring structures. Of course, it starts in the home, parents mentoring their children. But more than that, I think if we were to put in a proper mentoring structure all through our church, things would be so much better. So, stage 2 then is the foundation stage. This is where we start learning much more about God. And as you learn more, you get a stronger sense of belonging, a stronger sense of feeling that you're part of the group, if you like. And as the more you get to know, the more you develop this sense of yes, we're right. Our understanding of the Bible is the right one. During this stage, because there's such a hunger for more knowledge, stage 2 people tend to grow very much by the mentors that they latch onto, strong leaders and teachers and mentors, that they gravitate to them. And of course, if with this there's this strong desire to follow that person. Now, if we don't provide mentors for people, they will find their own. And I think part of what the problem that we have in the church today is the fact that because we haven't provided mentors for people, they've gone, and where do you go? You go to YouTube, you go to social media, and once a person latches onto a mentor, it's really difficult to get them away from them. Sometimes when you're in Sabbath school classes and you're hearing people coming with ideas and you think, well, where are you getting that from? From their mentor online. Whoever it is that they feel is their hero, the person that they want to get their knowledge from, that's where they're going. And once they're there, it really is difficult to get them away. So, yeah. And the problem here is that, because you feel so right, you're correct, you've got the right doctrines, etc., it can be pretty inflexible. And we see that all too often. And there is this tendency to want everything to be very simplistic. There's a desire for very easy answers, and especially if their mentor, their online mentor in particular, gives them the easy answers. It's black and white, everything's either right or wrong. That's the way you tend to be in stage 2. Biblical examples. I was wondering, maybe James and John. You remember when Jesus was supposed to be going through a Samaritan town, and they said, no, if you're going to Jerusalem, you're not allowed to go through here. And James and John got so angry, they said, Lord, should we call down fire from heaven on them? And you think, okay, where did they get that from? It's from the Bible, right? Elijah did the same thing, so they're just following the Bible as it is, and of course Jesus had to say, no, that's not what I'm about at all. That kind of inflexibility that they were showing there, yeah. So you can get stuck in this stage, and the main sign that you see of people that are stuck in this stage is that they're very legalistic and judgmental. And I know we're all thinking we know, we've seen this in church, and this is what happens. People get stuck in stage 2. This is what happens because you've got the easy, simplistic answers. Their mentor, online mentor, is telling them what is right and what's wrong, and they're just following them. And so their approach to faith is very rigid. There's no flexibility in there. And the big problem is that they can't see their own rigidity. They just think they're being faithful. They don't realize they're being inflexible. Yes, black and white thinking. It's all the same kind of picture. This is how you can get stuck in this foundation stage. So, mentoring, as I say, it's important to help people get mentors before they get their own, and that can be quite dangerous. If you're mentoring someone in stage 2, it's really good to help them discover what their giftedness is so that they can use their spiritual gifts. But also to help them nurture relationships. The problem with stage 2 is because you're so consumed with being right, you don't care if you hurt other people. And so you need to be helping them get more heart than head, if you like. Put your heart before your head, and to be aware of other people enough to go and perhaps renew some of those relationships that they've trampled on. It's a slow but definitely needed process to help people in stage 2. Stage 3 is what can be called the success stage. This is where we are doing things for God. I mean, this is where things are going really well. People are active in ministry. You love to have these kind of people in your church. They have this sense of, calling to some kind of leadership within the church, very productive in helping to change other people's lives as well, and getting followers. In this stage, you feel like you've arrived. This is the pinnacle, and everything's functioning really well in your spiritual life, in everything that you're doing, and they're pretty confident in this stage, and it's no wonder because things are going very well. Examples perhaps is Saul, the 70, when Jesus had sent them out, and they came back and said, "Wow, it really works." We were casting out demons. I mean, this was fantastic, and they were really on fire. And Jesus had to say, "Okay, but don't get too hung up in all of that. It's really about whether or not you have a connection with the Father. That's the important thing." But anyway, the success stage it's good. The rich young ruler, I think, felt he was there. He'd been keeping the commandments, been doing it all his life, but he did have a sense that maybe he wasn't quite the way it should be. The parable of the talents, I think, speaks to this as well. Can get stuck in this stage. Because you're so successful, you think, why do I need a mentor for? You can think that you can mentor other people, but let me just say it now. Whatever stage you're at, it's important to have someone that you're going to for mentoring. So in this stage, there is this very strong love for achievement and being recognized for what you're doing, and how you're performing. And yes, you can get pretty hooked on getting everything right, hooked on perfection. And there's this just love of being busy, always engaged, always doing something or other. It's almost like you get a buzz from being engaged in things all the time. Of course, the problem is that you can get burnt out from doing too much, and then resentment sets in. So if you're going to be mentoring someone in this success stage, you want to help them to be not being so busy doing stuff for God, but to be actually surrendering themselves to God, to make sure that they're practicing those things that strengthen their own personal spirituality. As Peter Scazzero likes to say in his books, you get so busy doing things for God that you don't take time to be with God. It's important then to help the person to be discovering and practicing their own spirituality. Somebody that I'm mentoring at the moment, this is what I'm helping him with, helping keep him accountable for his spiritual practices. Because as a pastor, he's very busy with doing lots of stuff, and he's doing very well. But the danger, and he's recognized it as well, is that he's doing things that his own spiritual connection with God cannot support, and it's really important to recognize that. And yes, so person at this stage needs to be able to try and find someone somebody further along in the journey as their mentor. Now, just when you're at the pinnacle of success, when everything's going really well, there comes this in-between bit, and it's called the dark night of the soul. Some people call it hitting the wall. This is where there's this overwhelming feeling that, is this all there is? And suddenly the prayer life doesn't work. Reading the Bible just does nothing for you, and you just feel like it doesn't work anymore. It's also known as mid-faith crisis, if you like. You kind of start feeling that your prayers just aren't getting anywhere, feeling like a failure. It's as if God's kind of closed the door and he's not answering in any way. Nothing seems to make sense anymore. Church can often end up being meaningless. And you start asking, is that all there is to what church is? And we come to the realization that maybe most of the things that we were doing were a little bit selfishly motivated, motivated by ambition and the desire to please other people rather than trying to please God. It's a depressing place to be, really. But really, it's a place where God's calling us to go deeper with Him. I think, Job definitely went through something like that. I think Jacob went through this kind of a thing as well. And what's the remedy? Yeah, time to listen to God's voice, time to think and to reflect, time to reevaluate. A good senior mentor is needed here. And the problem is that when you hit this stage, because you've come from a successful stage, the desire is to go back to where you were, to try to be busy again, to try to be successful again. I remember when I went through this, it felt like everything came crashing down, literally. And it was like a perfect storm. I was in a church district up in the north of Norway where instead of my churches growing, they were dying. So can you imagine, as a pastor, you come to a district and instead of your churches flourishing, I had this one church I came to, and the main church, so I had a district with 3 churches. The main church, it had about 25 people. So this is not, we're not talking about big churches here. And so, I came as a new pastor, started setting some faith goals. I said, okay, by the end of this year, let's pray for 15 new souls. And we were praying and trying all kinds of things. And at the end of that year, we had lost 15 souls. Now, can you imagine what that's like as a pastor? That's people that moved away, people that died, people that stopped coming to church. On top of that, we had 2 children at the time, and my oldest one, we got the diagnosis for him, and it was depressing. It was really very bad. And at the same time, I was hearing about what was going on in my family back home in England, and things were not going well there. So I just thought, you know what, I should just give up this whole thing. Forget being a pastor. I was a nurse before, so I thought at least I could go back to that, because there at least I could help save some people. In church, I was going to give it all up, believe me. I wish I had a mentor at that time, because that would have helped me. What helped me was I got hold of this book, What's So Amazing About Grace? And for the first time I realized that God doesn't look at me in terms of how well I do in ministry. It was basically the message you gave us today, Madeline. God loves me because He's love. And nothing that I do can help me to earn that or whatever. And that started me on a journey. I didn't come out of it like that. Started me on a journey to start rethinking how I do life, what success is, etc. And that helped me through. After that, I started looking for a mentor and things like that, and ever since I've done that. But this dark night of the soul is not fun, and you really do need a good mentor to help you through. Someone that will patiently be listening, empathizing, accepting. Hopefully, if you get through that, and by the way, it is said, someone did some research on this actually, in that pastors, when they hit the dark night of the soul, what was it? I think it was 60-70% of them go back to stage 3 with their success and just go through the motions for the rest of their life. Part of our problem as pastors is that we don't have mentors. And so we think stage 3 is where it's at, so I just got to get busy, just keep doing that, and that's how I will continue. But hopefully if you can get through it, you get to stage 4, which is called the journey inward, where you start figuring out a new way to do your relationship with God and with other people. In this stage, you really start to enjoy just studying deeply, praying for long periods of time, spending more time alone, but eager for mentoring. You want someone with some depth to them that can help walk you through this. And they're also eager for deeper relationships. Surface relationships just aren't the thing. And here you discover your unique purpose, constantly asking challenging questions. That's one of the things with this stage. And if you think about it, often in Sabbath school classes, if you've got a stage 4 and a stage 2, it's going to be fireworks, because stage 4 likes to ask questions, not necessarily finding the answers. Stage 2 want to be able to give definite answers. So those two clash all the time. And that's what you see happening often in churches. And so it's a move from doing to being, from head to heart. It's like a second conversion, if you like. Won't bother with the stages of friendship for now. And yes, I think Paul was a very good example of this. He spent 3 years having to rethink everything once he was converted. You can't get stuck here. You can't get stuck in just always thinking negatively and getting discouraged. Can be too consumed with self-assessment and always going through that kind of a thing. Yes, stage 4 enjoys not having the answers, but you can just be there all the time and never give any specific answers or find any specific answers. This spiritual ambiguity can just set in, and that can be a little bit dangerous too. And the challenge, of course, is that doubt can lead to more doubt rather than to faith. Doubt isn't necessarily bad because it can get you to question. But if all it ever does is make you question more and more and more and never actually find any answers, then that can be a little bit negative too. So if you're mentoring someone in stage 4, acceptance, again, and affirmation, it's all the way through. Encouraging them to allow God to be God, to let him out of the box, to let him be who he is, and to allow God to teach and lead them in a way that perhaps they wouldn't have thought of before. And possibly, it could be that people need to process their past traumas honestly. That some of those things may have come up in the dark night of the soul. And this is where people need to get professional help. This is not for, pastors or whoever else to think that they can go around helping people. No, you need to tell people perhaps you should go and see a professional to deal with some of the things that has come up in your life. Then stage 5, the journey outward, learning to live from a totally different place. This is where people then are able to have a different mission to their life, bringing change to the rest of the world. A real sense of motivation, of a call from God. And they are seeking to not please everybody else, but really just to please God alone. And it doesn't matter what others think, if you like. Before, you may have been motivated by a sense of duty, but now it's a God-given love for others. This is a great place to be working from. It's a bit like stage 3, but the motivation is different. Instead of that stressful, like being busy all the time, here the person's much more at peace. They understand where they are and why they are there, and they're driven really by that sense of peace that God gives. I think Moses reached this place. Daniel was there as well. Definitely, Peter learnt it after a while, and of course, the Apostle Paul too. I think there's some very good examples of that. You don't really get stuck here, but they, because they seem to be on another agenda, they seem to be out of touch with people a little bit. So that could be a challenge. They can seem a little bit indifferent to some of the practical concerns that people have. For mentoring, encouraging them to look at everyone and everything through God's eyes, to have a kind of sanctified, no-care attitude. And then some say, you reach this real good stage, and then comes this second dark night of the soul. It's like, well, what's that all about? It's because the closer you walk with God, the more you will seem to be out of step with religious communities and institutions. This can bring a crisis. you'll notice that the institution that you're a part of, you perhaps start to, your way of thinking and doing things starts to diverge from each other. And here it's, you got to understand that it's best when you're mentoring someone that you mentor someone that's perhaps one step behind you, if you like. If you're 2 steps ahead, you're a bit of an enigma and people just don't get you. But if you're just 1 step ahead, you're just a little bit ahead in the journey, and perhaps people can look up to you in that way. Perhaps the greatest example would be Jesus in Gethsemane. Anyway, the final stage is unconditional love, where everything is all about God. This becomes that driving rule of life, where we treat others as if we're serving God Himself. And there's, material things don't appeal. And the problem with people at this stage is they're a threat to systems and institutions because they love the enemy. The way everything is set up, there's us and then there's them. These people love them as much as the us, and it's like, what do you do with a person like that? That just, And perhaps the only person that we know of in this stage was Jesus, and because He was so much a lover of everybody, the system just didn't know what to do with Him and had to, in the end, put Him to death. So maybe He's the only human example of stage 6 that I can think of. The implications for this, I guess the thing to ask yourself is, and the point of this is not so that you can now go and start diagnosing other people. It is, what stage most accurately describes me? Now, most of us want to be stage 6, we want to be the most mature, etc. But we've got to be a little bit, be open with yourself. Like I said, doesn't matter what stage. No stage is better than another. It's okay. Which one do you think would most nearly describe you? The question then to be asking, that I think is really important for us all: who is mentoring me? We all need mentors. Now, you can have peer mentors, you can have people that are older than you, but who do you have as a mentor? When we talk about discipleship, it's the same question. Who is discipling me? However you want to put it. Who do I have as a mentor? Who would you go to? Who would you approach? And that's really important, because if you're not experiencing what it's like to be mentored, it's really almost impossible to go and mentor somebody else. So I think that question, it's important for us all to think about. And perhaps if there's one thing you want to take away from this, go and find yourself a mentor if you don't have one. Because after this question then comes the next one: who am I mentoring? Someone you should be mentoring. I think as parents, maybe that's one of the things we need to think about most. Am I mentoring my children? Not just bringing them up, but mentoring, leading them, helping them understand the faith journey they're in. By the way, I should have perhaps said it. That dark night of the soul, when people hit that's the time when they will be leaving church. And I think we lose a lot of people there, and they don't realize this is a natural part of the journey. If they had mentors, they'd realize it. It's okay. The questions that you've got now, it's quite okay. And stage 4, when once people start to ask questions and they're not getting the answers in church, they also leave. I know, my oldest son, he's going to be 28 soon. He's that kind of stage 4 at the moment, questioning everything. Doesn't want to have anything to do with church because he just doesn't meet the needs that he has, and we talk a lot, so that's my kind of mentoring of him, and yeah, I'm not trying to say you got to stay in church. I'm just trying to keep him connected to God, because I think it's important, and it's okay for him to be questioning. It's okay to have all those questions, and I think for our young people, they really need this. So this, you know, you may be able to choose some people in your church and think maybe I could approach them to mentor them, or they may be coming to you and asking you, because that's what I've had several times now, people coming and asking, would you be willing to mentor me? I think the need is out there, and like I say, if we aren't doing it actively, people will go and do it anyway, and generally they're finding mentors that perhaps aren't the best for them. A lot of the online gurus that are out there. So those are the things I would say we need to think about. Institutionally, do you think our institutions mirror these stages? Do you think our institutions perhaps go through these stages? And even more so, can religious institutions ever move beyond stage 3? Because when I first started looking into this, years ago, when I first read Fowler's book, it hit me. I was thinking, hang on here, Sabbath schools just seems to keep us at stage 3. But maybe then institutions can't go past that. Because what leader of an institution would want to lead it through the dark night of the soul, where people just perhaps go through that kind of a thing? That wow. So yeah, just a few questions for you to think about, and that really is it for me with regards to this whole thing about stages of faith.